Good morning. Welcome to Soulbirth here on Edge Radio Australia. An absolute pleasure to have Faye Suzanne next to me.
Good morning, Aaron.
Good morning.
How are you?
Jeez, I don't know why I said it that Faye Suzanne. It just felt very right for
Oh, there you go. It rolls off the tongue, doesn't it?
It does. It does. I'm not going to lie. I'm a little bit, I don't know, I'm taken aback by your little friend here that you have. We all have an imaginary friend at some point of our lives, but you've brought them in today.
This is not imaginary.
No.
This is my baby.
Your baby.
I have to bring my baby in, and my baby today has come with an attachment.
Yes.
Yes, a very important attachment.
Not an attachment disorder. This is completely, this is very natural.
Very natural and very important attachment that all babies come with.
Well, this is a big thing. So we're going to be obviously talking about the placenta today.
We are. Fantastic. Well done.
Well,
how did you guess?
I wasn't going to say bungee cord, was I? Well, I've seen these in the flesh.
You
okay,
have,
so
yes.
I've had a little bit to do with this in my life.
Mm-hmm.
No, I've never had one myself, but kind of I have.
You have. That was your first attachment in life. Do you realise that?
I didn't even think about that. No.
Yeah, when you were first conceived, that was the first thing that developed to attach you to the side of your mum's uterus.
When I was first conceived, that starts first.
Well, once you were conceived, once the egg floats down and implants, it's the placenta that starts to develop to actually, stick to the uterine wall, which provides all the nourishment for the baby to grow.
We're a minute in and I've learned something cool already. I didn't know that. I don't know why I didn't know that, but I didn't know that. Well, obviously, look, I've been very lucky to be at the birth of all my babies, and it's something I was warned about. I mean, warned's probably the wrong word, but something I was aware of, obviously doing the old antenatal lessons and stuff. But it's still, for a guy standing there, it was quite an experience, I'm going to say. Right? It's a bit different.
And so many people don't realise or they forget, even if you're told in your antenatal classes, they kind of forget that there's the placenta has to come out after the baby.
Yep.
And so, you give birth, the baby's out and you think, oh, that's it. And then suddenly the woman starts to have more, contractions. And then she's going, what's that? What's that? And then it's like, the placenta has got to be birthed yet.
And there's the moment of terror. That could be another baby. Right? Geez, things might get very serious here. No, you're so right though. And obviously I was prepared. I went and did the all classes and carry on, which I do have a couple of points on that. I don't know why they're called antenatal. Why are they called antenatal?
Anti is before, but it sounds like if it was ANTI, it would be so anti as in a
I'm against it. No, I'm all for it, right? I'm all for it.
And an E on the end, but it's anti is before.
Yeah,
post is after, so it's antenatal.
Is this Latin or something? Is that what's going on? I don't know. But it's true though. As far as in the moment, you kind of think, oh, hang on, what's going on now? Oh, that's what's going on. So, it's a big play.
But it's an interesting organ. Like I love the placenta. I'm actually we were having a discussion before.
Yeah, we were
before we started, and you were saying, some more negative comments. But I love the placenta personally. Like I'm really passionate about.
I've got nothing against the placenta. They're pretty darn important, but no. I was just the different cultures, what people do with them. I don't know. I'm not at ease at that. But having said that, maybe I shouldn't be, because different cultures have their own different rights to different things.
Exactly. And we'll discuss a bit of that later on. But but I wanted to talk about how important the placenta is, because because people sort of forget about or don't even realise that the placenta actually plays like a huge role, because if we didn't have our placenta, well, we wouldn't be here. Basically.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Because it's the lifeline, for the baby between mother and baby. It's the organ that attaches to the side of the uterus, inside the uterus, and then the amniotic sac actually creates, like it's around the baby, because it's like the egg yolk. The egg yolk is what develops the baby, and then the sac is around the baby, and all the fluid is within the sac. So when we see a real placenta, it's not like this at all, because it's actually very fleshy, but also you have membranes hanging down usually, and there's an opening which is where the baby actually came out. But they were actually back around the baby on this side with the cord and the baby inside the sac.
Is that okay?
Yeah, whereas once the baby's out and the placenta comes out, you hang it up by the cord and the membranes will hang down this way, and you always make sure that there are two membranes. Got to have the amnion and the chorion, which are the two membranes that protect the baby.
So why are there two?
There's two. Well, it's for strength.
Okay.
And actually there's a layer of fluid between the two sacs. But and also like if you have a twin pregnancy, you can have when you've got identical twins where usually within the same the amniotic sac inside.
Sure.
Yeah, and so they're growing within the one sac, whereas if you've got non-identical twins,
Sure.
they have their own amniotic sac within the chorion.
Right.
Yeah.
They've moved out of the room
technical.
already.
They're
Look at
in twin rooms adjoining.
That's right. It's a bit like that. Hotel rooms with the adjoining door, right? Pretty
exactly,
much.
Yeah.
That's interesting. See, again, like these are things, I mean, I don't think about in my everyday life because, why would I? But yeah, with twins, I didn't even think about different sacs. I always just think they're in the same one. Of course they are if they're identical, right? There you go.
So, but the placenta, is really full of nourishment. It's the one that's full of the hormones. It gets all the blood from the mum, sort of adjoining there. So all the oxygen nutrients come from the mother and through. You got all these blood vessels on the top of the placenta, and they come through the cord. So then we have all the blood vessels feeding the baby.
When you talk about it like that, right? Let's think about this. All these things we engineer in life, we develop, and we think we're so damn clever, right? We can make all these bridges and electronics and all sorts of things. Just think about the human body in the most basic form. Look what it can do.
I know.
That is incredible,
amazing, isn't it?
It really is.
I know.
And the instructions are all sort of built up here and in the body and in the soul, I guess.
Yeah, nature's amazing, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah,
really
and humans, we're not the only ones that have placentas. All mammals, have the placenta when they're born. So you see horses, cows, whenever they birth a baby.
Sure.
Then they usually eat their placenta afterwards. So
I know.
Penny dropped.
No, Penny has dropped because I've seen it.
Yes, you've seen
I've
it.
just realised I've seen that. There you go.
Yeah. So if you watch any animals in nature that have placentas when the baby's born, they usually sit there and they lick their amniotic sac and all the liquid off the baby.
Yep.
And it's all part of an imprinting process as well.
Okay.
So as the mother is licking the child or the calf or whatever, they're actually imprinting the baby with the tongue. And so the baby knows that's the mother, and the mother picks up on the scent of the baby. We don't do that as humans.
Not
Well,
not every day.
Say
No, it's not my standard practice.
So I'm not happy about that.
Yeah. No, but even in domestic animals, you see that with dogs, do that sort of thing,
exactly.
and so.
But that's why it's really important after birth that we put the baby straight up to the mum's chest, and we allow the baby to, to get the scent of the mother, and the mother to get the scent of the baby, and to have the skin to skin. It's really important to have that
skin to skin,
at least an hour after the birth to have that imprinting time, so that they pick up on each other's cues.
So, I mean, often, and that's an interesting point. So often with births, obviously, that don't go down the natural, natural's not the right path or word for that path.
Physiological.
There you go. We use that one.
Physiological
going down that path, though, say baby has to be run off to a nursery or something like that, that bonding time can often be missed. So,
absolutely. So if there's time when the baby has to be separated from the mother, then they miss out on that important bonding time. And so I've always, believe too, and I know this to be true in practice, is that we can do a lot of resuscitation on the baby if it needs it, with the baby on the mother's chest as well. And also a lot of resuscitation can be, we don't need it if we allow the placentas to stay, attached. So we're not.
Can you explain that to me then?
Yeah. So because it's a life support machine for the baby. So while it's still attached in the uterus after the baby's born, so say baby comes out, baby goes to mother's chest, and then we kind of forget about what's going on because we're too busy, meeting our new baby, and it's a really good time to bond, and maybe they'll be sniffing around trying to latch or not. But in the meantime, what normally happens in a medicalised birth is that as soon as the baby's out, they will clamp and cut the cord because they will give an injection of syntocin to hurry up the placenta, the birth of the placenta. Because it's all about speed.
Of course it is.
Move on. So we'll get the placenta out as soon as possible and prevent postpartum hemorrhage. So they'll give an injection, and once they give that, they have to clamp and cut the cord. Because otherwise the uterus will contract and will give a huge big squeeze of blood into the baby, and then they can end up with jaundice, and then they might need phototherapy.
So say at a home birth, for argument's sake, or a birth in a place it's not a hospital, do they leave the placenta on longer?
So and you can do this in hospital too. It's just that most people don't know it's the physiological third stage.
Sure.
So again, it's like leaving it to do what it needs to do, because the placenta is actually still feeding the baby nutrients and oxygen.
That's what I think. Yeah.
As long as it needs to, until it's adapted to extrauterine life.
Okay.
So when the baby first comes out, they're quite blue because they're not oxygenated. So because they've been inside the womb and they've been getting all their oxygen through the cord. So when they come out into the air outside, they take a big gasp or, big breath of air.
All the old days of the slap on the bum.
I know, which is so not
I
needed.
know, but
I know. But yeah, when the baby takes its first gasp, and I love watching this in physiological birth. So if you leave it undisturbed and you've got a nice peaceful environment and the baby comes out, quite often they don't cry. And that's good because the baby doesn't have to cry as long as they take a breath.
Yeah.
And babies take a breath at all different times. Some of them will just go like that. And other babies.
You just
come out
nailed that
scream.
sound, though. Honestly,
Did I?
no, I mean it. Like I
I've done it a
remember
few
that. I
times.
really do that because it's kind of that. It's a little breath that kind of builds up. I'm
Yeah.
not even going to attempt how to do it, but you nailed it.
Well, I've watched it a few million.
Just
well, not a
maybe
few
exactly.
million, a few thousand times.
Far more than I have. Far more
Yes.
than I have. But that's interesting. So the clamping also of the cord, right?
Yes, so
they do jump onto that incredibly quickly.
exactly,
Don't
and
they?
it's not needed, and you're actually interfering with the physiological process.
Okay.
Because if you allow it to happen when it's ready, once the baby has established its own airways, it's breathing, and then the oxygen is flowing through the body and the lungs have opened up. And so something changes inside the baby, like the whole circulation inside the baby actually changes.
Okay.
So that the lungs open up and they start to breathe through the lungs, so they don't need the oxygen from the cord. So as that happens, then the cord stops pulsating on its own.
Right.
So you can tell, because we can always check the pulse of the baby through the cord, and we're always feeling the cord after the birth to see if it's still pulsating. And you can check the baby's heart rate through the cord.
Wow.
And once it stops pulsating, then you know that the baby is actually not getting the oxygen from the placenta anymore. So then the placenta should actually separate on its own and come out when it's ready. There's no need to clamp and cut and then wait, or to pull the placenta. It should come out when it's ready.
So a couple of things on that. So can you ask the hospital, can you ask your midwife to say, hey, I want that left on as long as possible?
Absolutely.
Okay. I mean, I reckon that's really big knowledge.
It is.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly didn't know that. Certainly my wife didn't know that.
Yeah. And it's something that a lot of people don't know because it's not really in the it's not part of the medical model of birth, because everything's managed there, and it's all, a lot of it comes down to time, because if you use the Syntocin and it might be a different medication in different countries. So I know this is global, so it may be a different kind, but it's similar action, which clamps, contracts the uterus and expels the placenta quickly. So you have to clamp and cut the cord. Whereas if you just don't get medically involved, leave it, then it can take, instead of taking 5 minutes for it to come out, then it will take sort of half an hour to an hour.
That long?
Yeah.
Okay, wow.
It may come out sooner, but it comes out when it's ready.
When it's ready. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but if you don't interfere and you just allow the body to do what it needs to do, it will happen, and then the placenta will birth itself, or, the contractions from the uterus will expel the placenta. And you can help by just rubbing the tummy and helping to expel it, once it's let go.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, because again, like the business end of things, I'm not really sure what's going on. Right? Yes, adrenaline everywhere and whatever. So, do they always get the placenta out before they actually clamp the cord?
No, you don't have to. You don't have to.
Yeah, because that's what I just thinking to myself. I was just thinking with one of my kids, I don't remember seeing a placenta anywhere when we were doing the cutting.
Well, they would. Oh, yeah, because you're probably cutting it while the placenta's still inside.
Yeah.
Because it hasn't been birthed
actually,
yet.
now I think about it.
Because they would have given the oxytocin,
That's what's happened.
the
That's exactly what's
Syntocin,
happened. Yeah.
and so as soon as they give that, they have to clamp the cord. So what they'll do is put a clamp on, and then they'll squeeze the blood out of it, and then they put another clamp on, and then you cut between it where it's all white.
Yep.
But it's very hard to cut it too.
Damn
it's quite rubbery.
straight. Like, honestly, I was like, just someone get me a reciprocating saw or something. That thing is hard. But no, I went there, and I mean, the bloke, I'm reasonably strong, and I'm thinking, and like.
Yeah, but cord scissors are always blunt too, for some reason.
Oh, because I literally, I'm glad you said that, because I thought, man, these are blunt, right? Like, first I thought it's me. Well,
they should be sharp, but they're not.
They're not.
Always hard to cut.
Right.
But,
it's like they've been cutting, I don't know, paper with it in the meantime. Right?
Yeah. Exactly. But again, that can be done differently in different cultures, because I know a lot of cultures actually burn the placenta to separate it. Yeah. So you can, but that's something you do at home. Obviously, you can't do it in the hospital because you can't have a naked flame, and that's not your ex partner. Sorry, terrible joke. However, you can't have fire in the hospital because of all the oxygen.
Okay, mate, no one wants to blow the building up. Okay.
That's right.
Okay, no,
but in cultures, a lot of cultures, and in the indigenous cultures, they quite often burn it. So they'll once they need to separate it, then they might just actually put a flame under it. And they've got a special burning ceremony that they do that,
Well, I mean, it's because it's to close off all the nerve endings and the blood and all that, so all the veins and all the bits and bobs, right?
And
well, I've used all the technical terms there. The bits and bobs.
It's very technical. I'm really impressed with the way.
Well, I remember this. I know that like in silly thing to talk about, but okay, work with me on this one. It's like when in wars, when people lose limbs and things, they burn
cauterizing it. Yeah,
that's the word. There we go.
Yeah.
So you're effectively doing that in Indigenous, but
you are. And so and because in Indigenous cultures, it's a very sacred event, which is what it is. And I believe, to me, the placenta is a sacred organ, and I love to respect the placenta for the job that it's done, because it's sustained the baby's life for all this time in utero. And then, after the birth, it's like, well, I like to look after the placenta as well. And I like, there is also a thing called lotus birth, which is where you don't cut the cord at all. You leave the placenta attached to the baby until it separates from the umbilical.
No way.
Yeah, which can be like
with a press stud in this particular case.
This is a very technical baby here, but that you'll find if you leave it attached, and this usually is just for home birth, because the hospital, they don't really like leaving your placenta attached. You have to fight tooth and nail to get that to happen.
So how long would it take before that?
Usually about 3 to 5 days.
Oh wow!
Yeah, it's a while, but
is this why you get an outie rather than an innie?
Yeah, no, not at all. No, actually, it heals up really well, and you'll find that the cord actually dries out really quickly, and it ends up after a few days that it's actually quite stiff. It's a bit like what do you call it? Dried out tendons and things.
Yeah, well, okay. I mean, I know with the last little bit that comes off their belly button. Is it about a week later?
It's called a cord stump. So it's a little bit, because when you go home from hospital, if you've birthed in the hospital, you'll have a cord clamp attached there, and it's cut just after that. And so you have this little bit of cord sticking there, and that usually comes off about day 3.
There you go.
But when it comes off, you'll see that's a little hard.
Well, it's like beef jerky is what it's like.
That's what it's like, except, being a vegetarian. I don't like to, to me, that's a beautiful, again. I
was just trying to think of the texture, that's all.
It is, but it is like that, yes. But, if you have a lotus birth, which some couples do choose, and actually I've got a whole book on that, which I brought along here. This is a beautiful book written by Suzanne, who... Hello, if you're watching this at all, Siobhan, because I followed her work many, many years ago when I was living in Melbourne, when my daughter when I was pregnant with my daughter, actually. I used to go to some of her spiritual midwife retreats up in the mountains up out of Melbourne.
I know you've spoken very highly of her before. So,
And her book about lotus birth is amazing. It tells you all about the sacredness of the placenta and why people choose to have a lotus birth.
Oh, look, I'd like to have a lotus birth or a Porsche birth, Ferrari birth, Any exotic cars, really.
Oh, gosh. There you go. Have a read.
Have a read? Okay,
and also this other book that I've got here that I wanted to show people is by Robin Lim, who's another beautiful, amazing birth worker who most people, any birth workers will know Robin, because she runs her Bumisi Hat Birth Centre up in Bali, and she's written this book about, placenta, the forgotten chakra, because it goes into the whole, all about the placenta and how sacred it is.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and the energy behind it too, because there's a lot of energy and ritual around the placenta, which is, she goes into great detail in here, and I love the book because...
Are they your notes, or is that autographed?
It's autographed.
Oh, very nice. Very nice.
Beautiful little note from Robin in there. So, if anybody wants to get a copy of those books, I'm sure you can find them on Amazon or wherever, but they're perfect for reading if you want to know more about placentas, because... lotus birth is not something that most people choose, of course, because of the fact that you have to leave it attached until it actually separates from the umbilical area. But, the benefits of that.
Yeah, what are the benefits? I'm very curious.
Yeah, well, most people who do lotus birth are very spiritual in nature, and so believing in, the baby will let go of the placenta when they're actually ready, because it's a spiritual connection, because there is a lot in Indigenous cultures around the spirituality attached, because when we come incarnate, this is our lifeline to spirit. And so saying that you don't fully disconnect from that and be more on, earthly until we release our placenta. And so when we have a lotus birth, it means
so like a stage of life, effectively.
Yeah.
But just early on.
Yeah. Okay. So in order to keep it, obviously, you need to care for the placenta in a special way, because you can't
Glad wrap, Tupperware?
No.
Okay.
But you do need to have a special bag that most people actually that do this actually make up their own special bag to keep it in.
Okay.
But you do need to actually, pat it all dry, get rid of all the, the amniotic fluid and blood or whatever that's attached to it. And you can then pack it in salt. The salt's really important because it dries it, and you can put special herbs in with it, rosemary or can't remember now. There's a lot of different herbs that you can use, and some people put rose petals in with it, and different essential oils that help to keep the placenta so it doesn't stink, because it's a body organ.
Yeah, it is.
So after a few days it could get a bit woofy.
Okay.
So
in there with the oils?
Yeah. So you usually rinse it every day and then redo the whole drying, salting, and put the herbs and oils on it.
Wow.
And then you keep it in this bag and just maintain it and until it falls away. But
good on you if you can do that. I mean, I don't know. I cut myself shaving and I'm weak at these. Good on you if you can do that.
Yeah,
that's really
and
cool.
I just wanted to let everybody know that this is an option if you want that. But the thing is that because it's attached, the baby tends to be a bit quieter, which is not. But it's they don't. They're not as unsettled quite often. You find that most people with a lotus birth baby, the baby will be a lot more calm and settled. They don't move around as much, but they stay with the mother, and it's actually a beautiful time to actually be just together in this little cocoon where the mother and the baby can connect and really bond. And because most people who don't know about it, you have less visitors.
Winner.
So it's a good thing about that is it actually contains you in your it is, because so many people bombard the new mother with visits thinking I've got to go see them and we want to stay for ages. They bring all the relatives, and the poor woman is trying to recover from the birth and to be nurtured and nurture her baby and have special bonding time, and then they're bombarded by all these people that want to come and wish.
I've got two schools of thought on that. I mean, I get it, because the time on your own is like, I can see why that's important, right? No doubt about it. But the other flip side of it is, I've got a mate who they had their first child, and he and his wife, they're just beautiful people, right? Full stop. Without using name. So she's from an Asian background, okay, and they're very spiritual. So from that sort of thing, they wanted the time. So they actually asked for nobody to come and see the baby for a month, right? To have that time to bond and all of that. Good on them, right? Except for people like me, I mean, the baby's now 2.
You still haven't seen
them.
Growing a bit now.
Oh, look, I'll probably catch up when they go to high school, I guess. I don't know. But it's it's one of those things. Isn't it funny? People were getting angry about it. Like there were family who were going, I want to see the baby. And hang on.
Isn't that interesting? That is really interesting, because who is this birth about?
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going on that. It blew my mind. People were all narky about it. I was like, man, I understand. God, absolutely. You do you. If this is important to you and you want to spend that time, he took the time off work so he could bond with the baby really well. Because I think it's massively important for men to bond with their babies as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
The time also, the tummy time when the baby's first born. Look, get your gear off, mate. Get into it, right? Cuddle that baby. That's my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let them know your heartbeat. I mean, obviously they've been listening to your voice for the last 9 months. So
it's a special bonding time for the family. The mother, the partner, and any siblings that they've got. Special little cocoon time for them. And I think this is a really important thing to talk about, because we've been conditioned in our society, I suppose, to, it's a big, because it is a big event, but, why is it a big public event that everybody has to come?
That's right, yeah.
Because so many times what I witnessed when I was, working in the hospital system is that, visiting hours, the woman gets bombarded by visitors. There might be sometimes a dozen people in the room that have come to see them to give them the well wishes, but they're all hoarded in the room, and the poor woman is in the middle of it just going, she's looking around like they're not even talking to her. They're all talking to each other. It's like a big family catch up, and they're not actually spending the time talking to the mother. And the mum needs to breastfeed the baby, and they won't leave the room and let her, she's trying to.
Or they hang around. And I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with breastfeeding. It's incredibly natural. But if you've got, I don't know, spectators.
You don't want to. Most women are, especially if it's your first baby and you've never breastfed before, and you need help with getting the baby on and, all that, and you want to just focus on your baby, which is what you should be doing. If you've got a room full of people just all standing around or talking, it's just really off-putting, and it's, not many women actually like that.
It's a great point. I mean, I know, sort of strangely, if I'm in a particularly emotional mood or something's going on in my life, whatever, I very often just want to actually separate myself from society and just get away from people for a bit. And when something like that, this is such a big thing in your life. This is very emotional.
It is.
You've just become a mum, you've just become a dad, whatever the situation being, whether it's first, second, or whatever. But it's an emotional time for you and your family, and sometimes others can really intrude on that. So I get it. It's a balancing act. I find that certainly been my experience that it tends to be the woman's mother who is the most intrusive, and that I think I don't know.
Probably because they want to help, and
maybe,
and as long as they are helpful, it's like, I know people can have different relationships with their mother or mother-in-laws, and so it's beautiful if they're part of your support circle and they're there to help you. Because mothers, back in the old days when birth happened in the village, and the mothers were the midwives. And, and the support of women would come around, from the village to support the new mum, and they would be the ones helping her with breastfeeding and looking after the siblings and bringing the food and all that, which is still relevant in a lot of cultures.
Of course it is,
like the Indian culture. Like, I love their culture too, because they all bring the food, bring the curries, all the warm foods.
All the warm foods.
When you look at Ayurvedic diets, they're really good for post-baby, because they feed, whatever your dosha or whatever. I haven't done enough about Ayurvedic, but
you do make a good curry. I mean, you make a fantastic curry.
Thank you.
I enjoyed that very much. We had a curry night here.
We did, and it was great.
Everybody brought one along. I'm very disappointed with mine. I wasn't up to standard. Yours was delicious.
Oh, thank you. Nice vegetarian.
It was good.
But you need warming foods like that after giving birth to actually put the fire back into your body, because you lose a lot of heat when you give birth. And so,
I didn't know that.
You do. But what most women are given in the hospitals when they birth are sandwiches.
Yeah. Well, it's just convenient, and I didn't know that either. Wow.
See, I would love to see that change, where the dietary things were really looked at post-birth, because women need nourishing, warming foods after giving birth, because, they've got to restore the fire in the body, because they're usually shivering, even though that's a physiological response to birthing, but they also need to restore the heat into their body.
It's so funny from my point of view. So when my youngest son was born, and God, I love him, and my wife at the time, very happily divorced, but my wife at the time, they brought in a meal for her, right? In fact, they brought in a meal for her, and she said, "Look, I don't want it. And that's fair enough, whatever. And then she offered it to me. Anyway, and I thought, look, there was lots of things to do, and eventually I just thought, look, I'm hungry, so I had the fish.
Yeah, fish.
Yeah, I had the fish.
Sure,
all right,
market, weren't you?
I don't know. It was a nice hospital. Anyway, I had the fish. 15 minutes later, she's going, "I can't believe you ate my meal." And she got all angry at me and all aggressive. I was like, "You gave it to me." So there you go. She was like, and then guess what? They brought her sandwiches.
Yeah,
there you are. So now I didn't know that about the body thing. I mean, if that was the case, I just wouldn't have gone near that fish.
Yeah, but even so, I don't think fish is really the appropriate thing either. Like, I feel warm broth, is really restorative.
Could I have a bit of soup?
Yeah, but really nourishing soup, full of nutrients and things. A really good broth.
Right.
That restores the heat and also the nourishment that they need. And
what
that's
about
the best thing.
Bone broth? Would bone broth be a goodie for that
as
sort
long as you're not a vegetarian.
Well, yeah. That's a good point.
And then a veggie broth is good.
Yeah. Okay.
But anything that's got lots of nutrients. But yes, if you eat meat, then a bone broth is perfect.
Right. I just know a lot of people sort of in, I don't know, the health and wellness space that, really love a bit of bone broth, right?
They do, and it is really good for you. Right. So it restores all those nutrients that you lose during birth and whatever. So, perfect.
But warm. Okay. I did not know that. There you go. Another tip for the next kid you have.
Exactly.
Get out there, dads. Get your thermos.
Yeah,
absolutely. Okay, with a nice
bring
thick,
a thermos in.
I don't know, a bit of gumbo. I don't know, something with a bit of oomph to it.
This is why I love Asian and Indian cultures, because their family all bring the warm broth.
Yeah, okay.
Curries in for the woman after the birth. Yeah, which is beautiful.
Oh, look, well, an Indian culture thing about how the meals are prepared and taken to the people that say the men at work. I'm talking about traditionally in the old days. Yeah. With all of everything's still hot and there's I could go in great detail on it, but it's that cultural thing that's really, really good. And
Yeah.
I like it.
So
I
anyway,
didn't
I'd love to
realise they
see
did that.
reform like that in a hospital system to provide nutritious, warming foods to the new mum.
How good would that be?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and now that I know that the mums need warm food, I mean, that just changes a lot of my thoughts anyway.
Yeah, right. So if you want to support a new mum, take her a big bowl of soup or, a big pot that she can have next week.
Okay, that's a big pot of food. Don't bring your mum a big pot, whether it be a plant or anyway something else.
Anyway, we divulged from the placenta. And you
we
know how we
did.
got onto that? Because I was talking about when you have a lotus birth, you tend to stay at home and be nice and quiet for those period of time. So it's nice to have people coming and bringing gifts of warm food.
But your baby is quieter and
Yeah,
calmer and what?
yeah.
So
And the other thing that most people that I know that did lotus birth, they say that what happens when the cord is ready to separate, they've noticed that the baby quite often actually just hooks their toe around the cord and just goes pop, and it actually just disconnects it.
Does it itself?
Yeah, I've seen some, or pulled it with their hand, and it's just been a really gentle segregation.
No way.
But yeah, I've heard that story from so many people when they've had lotus births.
Wow.
Isn't it interesting? It's almost like the baby says, okay, I'm done.
Yeah, I'm done.
I can let it go now.
Oh, wow.
Separate entity. You've let your life support system go because you're ready to go without it.
I'm going to make a guess here. This is based on no science whatsoever, but I reckon that those kids grow up to be the most independent.
Yeah, you never know.
You think about it.
It'd be good to do a study like
wouldn't it be, right?
20, 30 years down the track and see how any lotus-born child, how they are.
I'd be very curious, especially if they're removing it themselves, because I mean that's the ultimate independence, isn't it? Like that's
exactly.
your first little foray into that world of independence.
Yeah.
That's cool. All right, well, good old placentas. Now you said a lot about them. Now let's talk about cultural things and things that people do with placentas.
Oh yes,
right?
Okay. There's a lot
if
you can
want
do
to. That's cool. I don't want to push it.
No, that's all right. I was going to talk about it anyway.
There we go.
Because generally, what happens if you give birth in the hospital system, you never see your placenta again. It kind of just gets sent off to the place where placentas get sent, which is usually the hospital incinerator, and you never see it again.
Yep.
However, you can actually elect to take it home with you if you want, but you have to sign a release form because you're taking a bodily part home with you.
Yep.
So they will get you to sign a release form, but that's fine because you can take it home with you, and you can either bury it in the garden or, do something with your placenta. Like I did this with all mine. I actually had mine, and mind you, I had home births as well or two of them. The last two were home births, but I had my first in hospital, my second at a freestanding birth centre, where I brought my placenta home, and the other two, I was at home. So with all my placentas, I actually kept them and had a special little planting ceremony. Okay. So just a little ritual, which I thought was nice because it just honours the placenta for the job it's done.
And the way the tomatoes grow is incredible.
It is. Well, when I don't laugh.
I'm not. Well, I am.
Because when I was living in Papua New Guinea, and I worked there up in the hospitals in the Highlands, and all the women there, all the placentas were buried in the banana patch.
Is that right?
Yeah, because they're high in phosphorus or phosphate. I can't remember now. I should have got my facts right. But anyway, the banana patch, all the bananas there grow amazingly. Really there you go. Crops.
It makes sense. It does. Like it really genuinely does.
I know. Yeah.
All those nutrients, all those goodies. Exactly. I mean, if they've been looking after the baby, they clearly can look after a banana.
Exactly. Oh my goodness. But for mine, I bought a special rose bush to honour the child.
Sure.
And what rose bush actually resonated with their energy. And then I did a little ceremony where I planted the placenta and then put the new rose bush on top of them.
You crazy hippie.
I am, and I admit it. I openly admit it.
You know what? Don't hide from it. Okay. Honestly, in this world where we're so homogenized, everything's so corporate, and I mean this is work with me here. I know I'm going off subject, but I watch TV shows or videos or whatever. Okay, and you see the same things in the background. So you can't tell the difference between Australia, Italy, and unless Colosseum's in the background, or the US or Norway. Like it's just we've become so corporate and so the same. Celebrate being different.
Yeah.
Be a hippie. Be a this. Be that. Be you. I just be you.
Exactly.
And
I am.
Thank you. Like you needed my permission, not. But it comes down to with your birth as well. Have the birth you want, not what the hospital tells you, not what the machine tells you. If you want to have a home birth, go for it.
Exactly.
Or a centre or whatever the case may be, whatever suits you.
Yeah, exactly. Just do that. And, most people want to birth in the hospital because they feel safer there. However, other people birth at home because they feel safer at home.
Yep.
And it's wherever it feels right for you. Yeah. And, with placentas, it's really interesting too, because Indigenous cultures believe that wherever your placenta is buried or lays to rest is the home of that soul. So, because it's your birthplace. So this is where you land,
Gotcha.
and this is where your energy is.
Okay.
And so, they always return to that place, and it's a sacred space. And so, and it's really interesting because out of my 4 children, one of them was born in Melbourne, and I planted her placenta in the front garden of the house that we lived in Melbourne. And she is my one child that wanted to live in Melbourne. So,
Isn't that funny?
she lives there. At the age of 18, I took her for a trip. That's what she wanted to do, was go to Melbourne. So I took her to Melbourne for a trip, and showed her the house where her placenta's buried. And she had an interview for university there, and she got in, and so she's been there ever since. And
wow.
So she's been there for must be what is it now? 14 years.
Wow, you're just drawn there. To that.
Exactly.
I had the pleasure of. This is not certainly not a story that just I know about. But Jacinta Napachinta Price, the politician from the Northern Territory, she tells the story, and she told me personally, so it's very nice, but she also tells it to crowds everywhere about the fact that her mum was literally born under a tree. Right?
Well,
okay. And look, the pride in her face when she says that, it's just really, really cool. And it's kind of like, you can come from anywhere, and you again, it's about, in their case, obviously, Indigenous mum. So that cultural thing there, I think it's really great.
I love it. And because that birthing on the land, and that's always been a tradition. And they usually go and find a tree somewhere in nature, and because especially when they've got a nice low hanging branch, because they're great for hanging off,
Gotcha.
birthing. So it's like supported squat, which is the best position to be in for birth. And so they dig a little hole underneath, and not a big hole, just a little, and that's where they birth. And it's just beautiful, because then that's where their baby was born. That's place of birth, and it's
that
sacred.
is it is. No,
so
I agree.
It's no wonder they feel displaced when they have to be brought to the cities to birth their baby, and then the placenta is left here at the hospital. So
That's
how do
a
they
great point.
feel?
That's
How
a
does that
great
impact
point.
their culture?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and I don't. I'm going to be a bit naughty here. I think that whether you're Indigenous, you're not Indigenous, I don't care. Okay, if you for a draw to the land, then that is a wonderful thing. I mean, I know there's land in my world and in my life that I'm so attached to. It's not funny. That's my place, right? Yeah. And what a beautiful way of being linked to the land by having a part of you
and
there.
I love it. And that's where storylines come from, and so many stories in that around birth, and how you treat the placenta, and how you welcome the baby into the world.
Yep.
Because that's my whole thing, is about the sacredness of birth, and how we honor the child that's coming in, and the placenta is part of them. It's just as sacred. It's it's been their companion for all that time. So it's a big thing.
Companion, I'd never thought about that.
It is. It's keeping them.
No wonder twins fight so much. Got to fight over their little friend. Well, okay, we've said about other cultures, and this is not just cultural. This is, I suppose, society in general. Now, some people do some interesting things with the placenta after birth. You want to talk about those?
Oh, sure. I know you've been dying to hear about this part of it.
I'm interested. I am.
So the other thing that people can choose to do is some people ingest their placenta, because it's known to have properties in there that help to bring back the the hormonal balance in the woman postpartum. So
right, is that what it's about?
Yeah, it is, because it does.
I never understood. I'm not sort of. I mean, each to their own, right? Yeah. But I've never understood why.
Well, they've probably followed, what, because animals in the wild do. They eat the placenta.
Yep.
And then they just get up and get on with life, kind of thing.
Sure.
And so I suppose people started to, try play around with that and think, oh, well, if they eat it, why shouldn't we? Like, is that part of what we should do?
Yep.
And then they notice the benefits to it. So I know scores of women that have done that.
Okay.
And they've said that it makes such a huge difference. And so back in the day, before you could dry it and crush it and encapsulate it, which is what most women do now. Okay. But before that was a thing, people would take little slithers of the placenta and just have a little tiny bit of it under their tongue.
Really?
And, and it would balance their hormones. And so, and I know one particular friend who swore by it and was doing that, and then a couple of days in a row she forgot to take it.
Right.
And her husband said to her, "Did you forget to take your placenta pills?" Because because he noticed a difference in her temperament, like she was getting a bit short.
Right now, I have the right to remain silent. Anything I say will
do.
definitely be used against me.
It will, and it's on camera. So.
Exactly. No escape.
But Yeah, a lot of women have sworn by that.
Mm.
Again, it's not the mainstream,
No,
but women
no.
do choose it, and more women are choosing it now too, especially because now it's been made more palatable. I still wouldn't, I can't swallow capsules, but
Well, no, but I heard about. Look, this is not for me. Okay, full stop. But again, I respect people's right to do where they want,
exactly.
right? When it comes to these things. But what about, like, I've heard of people that turn them into casseroles and curries and all sorts of things.
Yeah, I don't know.
No, you don't know that one?
No.
Oh, see, I thought you'd know all about that.
Oh, well, I mean, some people would choose to do that, I guess, but that would be a big hit. And like, are you sharing it with the whole family?
Yeah, the whole family eats it.
Oh, well, see, I don't see the benefit of that because it's the woman whose placenta it was.
Right. Okay. Yeah,
it's full of all the hormones, all the beautiful hormones for connecting with your baby and for bringing your hormones back into balance.
I mean, I say this because I have no knowledge in this area at all, but except for an Indian family that I know who actually did that. It did exactly that. And then the whole family had the placenta.
That's different. Yeah.
Okay, there you go. And I wondered if it was more common than I thought. Yeah, there you go.
No. Generally, these days, there are people that are trained in placenta encapsulation.
Right.
So they'll come and pick up the placenta from the woman, whether she's in hospital or at home.
Yeah.
They'll organise to come and pick it up, and then they'll take it and they have to dry it out, and then they crush it in some way. I haven't done it myself, so I don't know the actual process, but I know that then the woman gets back a jar of capsules with the powdered placenta in it.
Wow, like literally that. Okay.
Yeah. And then they'll just dose themselves with.
I'm not out there with a mortar and pestle going. No. Okay.
But you have to, have the people that do it have to have the proper setup.
I can imagine.
Yeah. But you can find them, like if you Google placenta encapsulation in Perth or wherever you are in the world, then you'll find somebody who does it if that's what you would like to do. Yeah.
Unusual. When you were saying before about ingesting, I didn't realise that was so formalised.
Yeah, it is.
There you go.
See,
Right. Okay.
It's become a real thing in the last probably 15 years or so.
Right. See, I only had all focus is to say my mate with a curry. So that's the only thing I knew. So,
Well, I did have a story from a friend once years and years ago when she kept her placenta in her freezer but then she went away on holiday and had some friend's house sit. And when she came back, the placenta was gone. And she asked what happened to it. Yeah, and they accidentally ate it, used it in a casserole or something. But I don't know how you would not because it would have a cord attached. So I don't know how you would think, it's anything but placenta. But anyway, that was her story. And
Okay.
But that would be very well balanced hormonally. House sitting.
That story is awful.
Oh gosh. So if you're going to store it in the freezer, label it really well.
Okay. Wow. In the freezer.
Yeah.
And what do people do that and then send it off to the pill making processor?
No, that has to be picked up fresh.
Okay.
So normally they have to, it's usually a doula or somebody else who's doing that as a specialty, but then they have to already be in agreement that they're going to be picking it up. So then the couple contacts them as soon as they can after the birth and just say, okay, we've had the baby, the placenta's here, and they've got to sign the release form to get it out, and then the person will come and pick it up from them and have the fresh placenta so that they can dry it. Yeah.
Interesting. I reckon there's a few questions about this because I've actually noticed on the other feeds that we can't see. I can see that there was actually people who were commenting. So obviously this goes out to so many streams. We can only see a couple actually come up. So I do apologise. That's just technology for you. I think during the week we'll have a bit of a look, I reckon. And
because it'd be lovely to hear people's stories or experiences of this. What they did with their placenta, and how do they feel about the placenta, and whether they see it as a sacred organ, and
I'm very curious to know about that. Yeah, obviously you go as far as replay. Well, you're obviously watching this now, but if you want to watch the replay, you can go to our YouTube page. It's always a good way. Pop some comments down there, and obviously we'll get the email notification on that so that we can follow it up. Or there is Facebook, there is Twitch, there's I don't know. There's lots of places. There's lots and lots of places. So we'll go back and look at those comments. Do you have any closing thoughts about the placenta?
Well, I mean, as I've already said, I love the placenta. I'm really passionate about it. And if you can get a chance to, see the placenta when it's born, get the midwife or, whoever's there at the birth to show you the placenta and have a good look at it and, how it works and, what it was doing, to nourish the baby. Yeah. But also, if you want to know more about how to do placenta encapsulation or what to do with your placenta, then you can always, look that up and find someone in your area that actually does placenta encapsulation. Might even try to get someone on the show.
That'd be cool. That'd be
talk more about that.
Can we? Because that's a really interesting subject. I think so.
Yeah.
I just didn't know about it.
Yeah, there you go.
think I know a little bit about lots of things. Clearly, I don't. There we go.
But it's a very sacred organ. So yeah.
And I agree with you on that one.
Yeah,
It really
beautiful.
is. Okay, it's such an important part of the entire process of the. I mean, it's just the miracle of birth.
Yeah,
right?
and yet it's often seen as an afterthought, or it is the afterbirth, but it's treated as an afterthought, and it shouldn't be. It should be actually treated as another whole part of the process.
Cool, love it. All right, thank you very much for being part of Soulbirth here on Edge Radio.